Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmer, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich, a statewide news service and jbiztechvalley.com. We have two very, very important guests with us. First of all is Honorable Leslie Stein of the Appellate Court. Welcome. And we have another judge over here, Honorable Rachel Kretzer. Judge Kretzer from New York.
Albany City Criminal Court.
All right, get the right title. Well, we have something very special, two female Jewish judges. I think we have an exclusive, Mark, over here, something that you really don't see too often. And that's really maybe the first question. Do you see, number one, female judges, or how many? I mean, we have the only two. We have a real exclusive. Or, and especially Jewish females, how many Jewish judges? Do you know the numbers there behind that?
Well, we've actually we're both students of this field for a long time, but particularly Rachel, who really has pioneered a lot of research into the area of diversity, particularly women, and in the profession and as judges. And the truth is that in parts of the state, particularly New York City, there is a lot of diversity, including a lot of women judges. But up here, in the Capital District region, in the 3rd Judicial District, it is not so, women are not so
common. It's not so common to have.
Do you have a reason for that?
Well, before we get to the reason, I'm going to expand a little bit on what Justice Stein just said. Downstate, and in particular in the 1st Judicial District, which is Manhattan, 60% of the trial-level Supreme Court justices are women.
Really?
Up here, in the 3rd Judicial District, which is the Capital District and surrounding counties, 0%.
Really?
Women on the trial-level Supreme Court.
So now
bench.
I can ask, what's
No
the reason
women
for?
on the
I mean,
trial-level
why do you
Supreme
say?
Court
I mean,
bench.
that's you say a few percentage off. Right, there's always a few percentage off, but that's from 60 to 0 is incredible.
It's very difficult to explain, especially given the fact that there are the same percentage of women in the population throughout the state, 52%, and the same percentage throughout the state in the bar as well, which is, the numbers vary depending upon who you talk to, but it's, as of the 2010 census, which is a little old at this point, it was about 35% now.
Of what, 35%?
Women.
In the bar.
In the bar.
1/3 of lawyers are
And now
female. That's what
their
you're saying.
estimates are that's up to 40% because the law schools have been graduating 50% every year, roughly, for the past couple of decades, actually.
Could it be that New York City is more liberal? I'm trying to grope for a reason. That's, it's interesting. Maybe they're more diversified and accepting. I mean, we had, for example, an African-American assemblyman, but I live up in Delmar here in the Capital District, but he represents the Lubavitch Chabad Hasidim, and there's no problem with that, so who cares if he's a black man representing Hasidim? There's more openness, does it make a difference if it's, but you want a good judge, who cares if it's a man or a woman? I mean, you want someone who gives you a good law.
Take it away,
Well, I would say perhaps they're a little old-fashioned, and we're hoping, and one of the reasons that the judicial section of the State Bar, which I chaired until just this past month when I rotated off, has just prepared a report which has been approved unanimously by the judicial section and by the Council of Judicial Associations, which is the heads of all of the judicial associations statewide, has unanimously approved the report, which will be going to the House of Delegates of the State Bar in a couple of months. And it is our hope that this report will raise the awareness, public awareness, the awareness of the decision makers, the political leaders, the appointing officials, and that once it's brought to their attention, that hopefully things will change.
Yeah, and I think, it's in the nature of things that things change slowly. And I think back to, was it 1984 when the first report on Women in the Courts came out. Again, highlighting the lack of women judges and women in the legal system.
Well, that was the year Judith Kaye was appointed Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals.
And it really opened up a lot of eyes, and I think that there was some change that was brought about by that report. And there are gender fairness committees now within all the courts,
I head the one in the third department now. Justice Stein headed it previously.
Let me ask you, but maybe from our viewers, but I'm asking for ignorance also. How is a judge, how are you appointed? Is it the Democratic Party? Is it, so where's the process coming from? It's not all of a sudden, hey, I'm a lawyer, I'd like to be a judge.
I think it's the governor, right?
Well, no, it depends on the court, and that's a very good question, and a good point, because basically, for city court judges, they have to be nominated by the party or run in a primary, and we're both elected. I'm elected to the Supreme Court, and then I'm appointed by the governor to the Appellate Division. Rachel is a pure election, but for the Supreme Court, it's a very interesting process because you have to be nominated by a party. And that happens at a judicial nominating convention in the fall. There are no primaries, and you cannot get on the ballot unless you get the votes of the delegates to this nominating convention. And that is a process that is very tied into each county's party leadership, because the fact of the matter is that not a lot of people know judges on a personal basis, or even lawyers, except for maybe their own. And so when it comes to deciding who's going to make the best candidate or the best judge, they have to rely on the information given to them by others. And so it used to be, and maybe to some extent still is, that when the party was looking for someone to nominate, they would say, well, what have you done for the party? How have you been involved?
More of a political than a judicial decision, you're saying.
Right. Some of each, but
Yeah,
that was part of the equation. And frankly, going back a number of years, women were not encouraged to take active roles in the party, and so they've had to assert themselves, and I think they've been more welcomed in more recent years, and that's where I think we'll see the change hopefully happening.
Now, I want to also point out that Justice Stein, Leslie, is the only woman ever put forward by the Democratic Party for the Supreme Court in Albany.
Okay.
She is the only one.
Now, the presiding justice of your appellate division is Karen Peters.
Yes.
She's from Ulster.
She's from Ulster County, which, depending on your perspective, is a capital district, Mid-Hudson Valley. It depends.
Oh, it's in the same judicial
yeah,
district.
it's a judicial district,
but
whether you consider Ulster County the capital district county, or from a television standpoint, it's part of our coverage area here in the capital district. It might be some other political geography where it's the Mid-Hudson Valley, so
Right.
it's on the boundaries. It's on the
I just
border.
wanted to point out, though,
true,
that Justice
That's right.
Stein is the first and only woman ever put forward.
And Karen Peters certainly is a pioneer of, and someone who we both have followed and has
She is
helped us.
absolutely a pioneer for women. Absolutely.
I do want to let you know that I was a delegate of a judicial nominating convention.
Oh, okay.
And I was told by my party chairman who to vote for, and I better not slip up. I better not, because they know my my penchant for my penchant for making trouble. And he says, "Don't you let me down.
All
This is the way we're going to do it, and it's got to come out that way."
And that's the way it's been done for decades.
And
right?
Historically, it's been tightly controlled.
And I
always.
wanted the experience of being a delegate, and I knew that it was the only year and the only time. So I went along, got along, and I didn't make any trouble. But they cross-endorsed, and
it's
that's
very
what they do.
interesting, Mark, that here we are in the 21st century,
Yes.
and pretty much we can say 50 years after the women's movement, just like saying, hey, we're here too, we can be doctors. My sister's an oncologist, so I appreciate it, and I think she's one of the better ones. So no, I'm just saying I understand that a woman's intelligent, and if anything, sometimes they're even better. So, but 50 years, and you're saying you're almost making inroads. You have to be a pioneer after 50 years to still find that equality.
Well, Karen Peters, who was the first woman elected to the Supreme Court in this 7-county district, and that was after 300 years that the Supreme Court was in existence. So yeah, it really is surprising, yeah.
And in that entire 300-year period, there has never been a person of color elected to the Supreme Court in the 3rd Judicial District.
So
in the 3rd Judicial Department, which is even larger, that's 28 counties
So
in the
tell
entire
me about
department.
your diversity report for the State Bar Association. What did you
Well,
find?
thank you for asking.
What did you find out? What were your conclusions of that report?
That there's a sharp divide between upstate and downstate. If there's a headline, that's the headline. And it's only partially explained by geographic differences in minority population.
So did you look at gender and minority status
Yes.
only? That's the
Well, we didn't, I wish we could have done
ethnic.
ethnic, and, well, we did ethnic, Hispanic as well. People
but
of
that's
color
not-
encompasses Hispanic.
Yes, but Irish, Italian,
No, you can't.
Asian.
There's no way to, I don't believe there's any way to do that. In fact, I would love to know the percentage of Jews on the bench, for example.
Yeah,
But-
like Judge Safranco is Jewish, and we having a vowel at the end of his name, I would never have thought that he was
right.
Jewish.
That's
That he was Jewish. So
So exactly, it's not one of the questions that the Office of Court Administration puts on the forms that they send to all newly elected judges. That's how these statistics are created and kept.
Okay, so just for
But what's your,
clarification, it's
yeah,
only.
but what's your, maybe, if you don't have any scientific results, your gut reaction about Jewish people, is it we're in the Jewish few Jewish people in the judgeship?
There are very, very few. In fact, in the Capital District, we in the 3rd Judicial District, our district, Justice Stein and I were trying to think of Jewish judges, and honestly, we may be the only 2 on the state court bench. You mentioned town judges, but they're not considered part,
You're
as
right.
important as they are.
You're right.
They're not considered part of the state.
Yeah.
That's remarkable, because Jewish people, you think of a Jewish lawyer, and I don't have any statistics also how many lawyers out of New York State. We're in New York State, we're not in Wyoming, number 1. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of Jewish
There
people
are.
here, and number 2, there's just a lot of lawyers. And you would think
Anecdotally,
that-
we can think, if we stop to think, it would seem to me that there are a very high percentage of Jewish lawyers. There are no statistics on it here, but anybody,
Certainly more than is reflected percentage-wise in the
Yes,
judiciary.
interesting. Yeah.
Now, I'd like to put in another pitch for the Jewish view, Judaism, because we're talking about the 21st century and women are still trying to, become equal partners with the men, and they should be. But you had in the Bible, many people in the book of Judges, one of the judges, Deborah, as they say in English, Deborah, and she was a prime leader of the Jewish people, and people, had all respect, and their heritage, you say it in Hebrew, total authorship of she is really the head person in that time. And you're really talking 3,000 years ago. And that's just saying not only in other countries you would never see that, but like you're saying, here we are in a United States of America, number 2, we're in a very liberal state, New York State, and you're still fighting for that equality. And, I was put in Judaism that every human's equal, and every person in Judaism has said that many thousands of years ago.
Well, if you think about it, we've never had a woman president in this country, and many nations have, including, of course, Israel.
Your golden meteor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And, okay, I'm always going back to the State Bar Association. Did you say that you are not the chair of the judicial section anymore?
no, as of June, I rotated off.
You rotated off because the Bar Association still has you down as saying that you're the new chair of the 307-member judicial section.
Well, they got a new
They haven't-
website.
Chair.
They haven't
Well,
updated
they
their
have to-
website. I guess.
I'll talk to the website person. I know who
Lisa
that is.
Von Jensen.
Well,
And you'll
she's
have
the
to-
press person,
Yes,
but
but-
I'll talk to the website person and let her know she
But
needs to
still,
update the website.
how long were you head of the judicial
I
section?
headed it for a year.
For a year.
The term is a year.
Okay.
And my term started last
So-
June and
So as
ended this
quickly,
June.
so as quickly as you were new, you were old.
Exactly.
That's right.
Um,
The
But I
second day
think we
she was
managed
old.
to get a lot done in that
period
1
of
year. I
time.
like
So
to think we got a lot
307
done.
members, though, in your judicial section.
Correct.
That's an amazing amount of people to approve a report that you, that you authored.
It's approved by the Judicial Council, which are the heads of all of the judicial associations around the state.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Supreme Court judges, the
So
Court
how
of
many
Claims
people
judges,
had to
the Family
approve this
Court
report?
judges. So the Judicial Council meets quarterly, and at the last meeting
Yeah.
of the Judicial Council, they took up the report,
Right.
and the 20 or so people there, each of them presidents of their respective
Right.
judicial associations, voted unanimously to
Boy, if the, yeah, to
approve the
accept-
report, to accept the report, and then bring it to the House of Delegates. I presented it to the Executive Committee of the State Bar in June, and I will have the opportunity to present it to the House of Delegates at its next meeting.
That's great, but I tell you, if there's anyone who knows how to set up a bureaucracy, the Bar Association knows how to set up a bureaucracy. I can't believe how many panels and committees and commissions and sections and
Talk
you know,
about
they're-
things moving slowly.
And
They do a lot of good things as well, though.
They do.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm
Yeah.
just saying I'm just acknowledging that that's the way it exists. That's all.
Right.
Yes.
Um,
So hopefully I'll be
know.
able to release this report soon.
Before it's outdated,
Before
right?
it's outdated, exactly.
So you're saying that there needs to be more inclusion, whether it's appointed or elected. You just need, the Bar Association or someone needs to encourage more people, either of color or of the female gender, to run for
The
office or be
reason-
appointed to office.
Yes, very much so.
That's
Now, the
important.
reason it's important that the State Bar do this, and the reason I took the opportunity as head of the judicial section of the State Bar to bring this issue to them, is that the Women's Bar has been doing studies and reports and issuing press releases over the years about the lack of women on the bench. And now the Black and Hispanic Bar locally has become very active in that way. But when it comes from the mainstream bar, I think that it hopefully will receive more widespread attention.
But and that's another point too, is that going back in the past, one of the rationales given for the fact that there was not a lot of diversity on the bench in this area was that there weren't a lot of applicants, and there weren't a lot of people who had been admitted the required number of years or whatever. And now, really, you can't say that anymore. So I think
There are a lot of applicants. I was just thinking, I'm still trying to grope with the question, but maybe it's a monetary issue.
that's part of
Number
it.
one, because if someone's super successful, lawyers making high salaries, and comparatively, and saying you're not on food stamps, but I'm just saying the judges are taking a cut. And also, I had once, I don't say his name, but it was a judge. I want to honor him. A Jewish person in the court, and then he accepted, and then you're shaking your head because then
Right.
I learned fast. He says, I found out I couldn't. So in a way, it's like a backseat job, and here's a person in the community making money,
Right.
doing things in the community, and then you tell them, I would just think, here's a very successful person.
Yeah.
We'll take almost a backseat. I'm not saying a judge is very influential, of course, but in a way, in the community, you don't have the money to spend or to flaunt, and you can't even be in a fundraiser. So maybe
still,
that's the
Well,
reason.
you can have fundraisers, but the fact of the matter is that especially to run in a 7-county district that runs from the Vermont border to the Pennsylvania border, and from what I understand is about the size of the state of Connecticut, you need a lot of money to run, a reasonably good campaign, and that's difficult. And particularly, and there have also been studies about how women don't tend to donate to their the
Fellow
candidates
women,
of their choice.
And women,
to anybody, they defer. Believe it or not, they
their
defer to their husbands. I mean, that's hopefully that's changing too.
I
But
hope so, but women also have a hard time asking for money, and that's something we have to get over.
Can I ask you something? Do people, when they see your name on the ballot, do you get feedback like, I didn't know you were a woman? Because you have a unisex name.
Yes, that's right.
Leslie,
No, not really, but I will tell you one interesting story, and that was after I was elected to the Supreme Court in 2001, I met a woman, an older woman, who had been a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat her whole life, and she never missed an election, and she voted every time for every Democrat there. So I knew that she had voted for me, and my name wasn't familiar to her at all.
Because
So
she genuflected right to the line.
Right. So, a lot of people don't pay attention to the judicial races, because they don't have a lot of information to go on, and for many people, they don't feel that it's relevant to their lives.
Yeah, I know that when you look at the vote totals, the judicial candidates get the lowest vote totals.
Right.
But they're also
they're voting.
Well,
but
the
they
other-
just skip the judge.
Yeah.
Well, they don't. They skip it because a lot of people, on principle, don't vote for someone that they haven't met or that they don't know well.
They don't know about. Like,
Or they don't
some of
know
the
about.
issues already.
But I'll tell you, through the judicial nominating convention, there are very few real elections. When you come out of that convention, when you're cross-endorsed, there's very little.
Well, there haven't been cross endorsements now for a number of years, but
4
what's
years.
happened is
I think
that
4 years, right?
maybe I think that maybe there was one
Yeah.
5 years ago, but in the last
Right.
since my year, I think there's only been one cross endorsement. But what happens is that what has happened, I should say, is that in the various judicial districts, they seem to be demographically lopsided. So in the 4th Judicial District, it's very difficult for a Democrat to get elected.
Right.
In the 3rd Judicial District, right now, it's difficult for a Republican to get elected. And so even though it may not be a cross endorsement, the fact of the matter is that your party, what party you're involved affiliated with may determine the outcome of an
Do you
election.
think that's a good system, though? I'm just even sitting back and thinking of that. Maybe, not that we're going to be able to change any system, but, I don't know.
There's been a debate for so many years about whether the elective system or the appointive system
Yeah.
is better. And in my view, they both produce some really excellent judges and some judges that maybe aren't, top notch. But I don't see one as necessarily better than the other. I think it's, there's always been some politics involved, and hopefully there's always some merit involved. And could the system be improved? Sure. But
It is what
it is what it is.
And we have the best system available that anyone knows of. We
Exactly.
That's what I just told my jurors. I just
Oh.
dismissed my jurors. They were we had another jury trial in my court, and I always tell them at the end when I thank them that whatever you may think of the process, first of all, I tell them it would grind to a halt without them, and
Right.
that's why they're so important. But whatever you think of our justice system, it is the best in the world, and I think we can all agree.
I'll tell you, I always, I love being called for jury duty, but I never get picked. and
If you'd
they,
be picked, you wouldn't like it anymore.
and they have this thing where I don't know if they do it in every court or whatever, but they have this old-time metal, like, ball revolving
Yeah.
thing that they pick
Yeah,
something
exactly.
out. That's the way they, like bingo, like it's
Exactly.
bingo.
It is. It's exactly like that, a
Okay.
bingo thing that
The
that
metal
our clerk
bingo,
uses
yeah.
to pull the names.
Oh,
yeah.
they do it in every county like that, or
Yeah.
just Albany County? It's
Well, I
don't
don't-
know. But
I don't
it's,
know, but
it was
I
seemed
assume so.
old-fashioned. But maybe it just worked well, since the 1800s, so they decided to keep going. Leslie, I just wanted to ask you. I wanted the audience to know that you were a law clerk in Schenectady County Family Court.
Right?
You were in private practice for 14 years.
Correct.
15 years, however you want to. You were on the city court bench.
For 5 years.
Albany City Court bench. And then you were on the family court
Well, I was an acting.
It says acting
I was an
family
acting
court
family
judge.
court judge while I was a city court
Right,
judge.
but that's why I phrased it that way.
Yeah.
You were on the family court
I
bench.
was, yes.
Well, I do some acting family court as well, but I don't
Okay.
consider myself a family court
Right,
judge
but
as
I would
such,
have.
but I'm acting
That's why
family
I
court
phrased it
occasionally. Yeah.
that way, because I didn't want it to seem as though you were elected to the family court. you
Right.
know, so they borrowed you.
They borrowed me, yes, yes. Family court is always shorthanded, although now we just got an additional family court judge in Albany County, so
Yeah.
that should help.
And you were also with the Rensselaer County Integrated Domestic Violence part?
Yes, that was a very interesting experience because what that does is it takes cases that have involvement in multiple courts. So it may be family court, it may be Supreme Court, it may be criminal court, and brings them all together, particularly where domestic violence is involved, and brings them all together before one judge. And so that one judge, and for a while that was me.
Those must be heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching cases.
They're very difficult cases, you know, and but it's also very rewarding work as well. My background before I went on the Supreme Court bench was in matrimonial and family law, so that's always been near and dear to my heart. Working with families.
Just even a Jewish idea to Mark, it's interesting because maybe our viewers and most people think a judge, hang them, not hanging judge, what they see on TV, that kind of thing. Guilty or not guilty in 25 years in the
Well, we
can.
had one in Albany, hang 'em high Klein, Judge Klein.
I mean, but, really, and it says that in Judaism, but I see this what you're saying, probably have the genes of some Talmudic, Talmudists in your background. But really, they say peshora, which means compromise, is really the best justice. If you can get people together, not like you're wrong, you're right. It's just, and that's the biggest art of just coming together and saying, hey, let's work it out. And
our job
people,
is to resolve disputes.
Yeah.
And to resolve disputes peacefully.
Well, let's just say
So-
that there's a difference between secular law and religious law. And we won't get into that right now because we have the Beit Din.
Yes.
And when the man has to give, or is required to give the get, the woman can't. And
You want to negotiate, you want to counsel people before, that's like the extreme, the bottom line. If it does, you can't, that's the best way out. I mean, you have to have a law how to deal with it.
yeah, but if the man doesn't want to give the get and the woman has to stay married, then the religious community, the Beit Din, puts pressure on the man to, and the community to put pressure on the man to ostracise him and make him feel not part of the community anymore.
Ultimately,
And-
Torah, and civil law does. They were on the same page. You want to have people
I don't
work
agree.
together.
I can't go along with that. I think Rachel can't go along with that either.
Well,
But
the community is trying to do the right thing with a bad law. That's just my opinion.
with a bad law, Beit Din, you mean? With the Beit Din.
Yeah, they're trying to do the
religious
best
law.
they can
Right.
with a bad law. The
Right.
whole law that we're talking
Yeah,
about with the
yeah.
gets and so forth, I personally,
Yeah?
And there's a lot more divorce
Don't agree
today than it ever was. I mean, even our parents, of course, I always say I'm 29 years old. But, people, I remember there's one person on the block that was divorced. And, in Judaism also, it just never was. I'm not saying it isn't now, but it's a funny time, where people just knew they were married, they were always married. So therefore you say divorce, even though it's common, unfortunately, today, and I do say unfortunate, because like you say, these cases rip up your heart, and the kids are you say a korban
Kids
in
always
Hebrew, they're the
lose.
sacrifice.
Yeah.
They totally lose, and it's terrible. But on the other hand, you try to work it out, right? That's what you're trying to do and make. It's a bad situation, they want to get divorced, you can't force people to stay married, but you try to work it out as much as you can.
I wanted to ask Leslie just one final question as we wrap up. With all this diversity in your background, whether it's family court and city court and the domestic violence part, does this all come together at some point and you get looked at for an appointment or for some higher judicial office?
Well, I think that it was helpful to me in getting appointed to the Appellate Division, and there's really only one higher court in New York State, and that would be the Court of Appeals, and that would require an application and consideration, and I would think that if that situation were to arise, that it would certainly be helpful to me. I think that there are a lot of factors that the
Well-
governor would look at in
Yes,
choosing a
well,
court of
If the,
appeals.
if the
Governor.
governor
Yeah.
gets reelected, I mean, the next 4 years, there are going to be quite a few
As a matter of fact,
Court of
more
Appeals.
than half the court
will be reappointed.
will be reappointed in his next term.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Yeah.
So, and
yeah.
I also, well, there was, anyway, I lost the train of thought. It was about the
Supreme Court,
judgeships
Appellate
and.
In the Court of
But,
Appeals, yeah.
former Chief Judge Judith Kay was a matrimonial lawyer, wasn't she?
No, she was actually a commercial
Commercial.
lawyer.
Commercial lawyer,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
but
thought
she
had
did
some
so much as chief
matrimonial.
judge for family courts
Yeah.
and children.
Yeah.
That was a real focus
Maybe that's
of
why I
her
thought she was
tenure.
matrimonial. And, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well,
You
anyway,
would-
we're
you
out
would
of time.
think so.
Out of time, listen, we have an exclusive mark, two
That's it.
female Jewish judges, maybe the only ones in the state, and we've
Not in the
been
state.
talking on the state, in our district. And
Yes.
unfortunately, that's true because there should be equal, and, and Judaism does, like I said before, give honorable, distinction to women, very much so. I think even more in the offending case, that's a different story than civil law. In any case, that we want to give you our blessing that you should continue doing the good work of New York State, and of course, personally, doing good work for the people of New York State.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank you,
on.
and thank
To
you
do
for
it
having
with good
us.
health.
Thank
This
you.
is great.
Thank you for having us.